The material for this lecture comes from Poemen, chapters 30 and 31. Make sure that you read the chapters carefully for the quiz and pay special attention to the lengthy quotations in the chapters from some of the original sources that cover, say, Kierkegaard's writings or Sartre's writings or others, as those will likely show up on the quiz. But existentialism is a big topic, and this will very much just be a summary of the chapters. So existentialism is really a departure from more mainstream thoughts in philosophy, especially in Western philosophy. And existentialism deals more with the philosophy of life than it does with the philosophy of ideas. Soren Kierkegaard is often considered the father of existentialism. Kierkegaard was a Christian, however, he very much departed from the traditional church of his day and had many problems with institutionalized aspects of religion. But most existentialists, such as Nietzsche, Sartre, and Camus, were actually atheists. And so it's interesting that the father of existentialism was a theist, was a Christian, but many of the early existentialists actually departed from theism. In Kierkegaard's early writings, as he was doing philosophy and learning a lot about philosophy and about theology, he wrote that what I really lack in life is to be clear in my mind what I am to do, not what I must know. And so you can see here the departure from traditional philosophy. A lot of philosophy talks about knowledge, about epistemology. How do we know the things that we are supposed to know? But Kierkegaard argued that the real interesting questions are not how do we know or what must we know, but what must we do with our life? He went on to say, what would it profit me if I developed the correct interpretation of Christianity in which I resolved all the internal problems, the philosophical internal problems, but yet what would that profit me if I had no deeper significance for me and for my life? So for Kierkegaard, what mattered is living. He recognized that there are major problems with every philosophical and theological system. The study of the history of philosophy is simply an exploration into those problems. And so, changing the project of philosophy then, he argued that philosophers need to stop looking into the shadows of ideas and start developing a philosophy of life. What does it profit us just to learn about ideas if we don't know how to live life? Following after Kierkegaard was the atheist philosopher and existentialist Friedrich Nietzsche, who is famously known for his death of God philosophy. And Nietzsche noticed that during his day, God essentially plays no vital role in our culture except as a protector of what he calls the slave morality, which is a Christian form of morality, including the idea of equal worth of all people. This is a slave morality that Christianity has introduced into the culture, that all people are created equally. And Nietzsche did not think this was correct, at least from a rational perspective. And so he went on to say, once we recognize that there is no rational basis for believing in God, then the whole edifice of slave morality must crumble. In its place will arise the morality of noble persons, what he called supermen. And so Nietzsche wanted to develop a philosophy where individual humans are the creators of moral truth, not some external creation. And so for individual humans to be truly free and not slaves, it means that there can't be any outward morality. So traditional Christian thought has argued that God exists outside of each individual human and imparts some sort of objective morality. And then, therefore, the reason why this is a slave morality, according to Nietzsche, is because we have no response in life except for to obey that which is imposed upon us outwardly. So, for individuals to be truly free, we must get rid of God. And Nietzsche actually argued there's no good reason to believe in God in the first place. And because of that, we are left to create our own moral values. When it comes to existentialism, there are three common theses of existentialism. One is that existence precedes essence. Two, that life is absurd. And three, that freedom is at the core of our existence. And so we'll look at each of these three very briefly. Existence precedes essence. What does this mean? Well, in classical philosophy, going back to Plato and Aristotle, classical philosophy actually argued that essence preceded existence. In other words, truth is outside of our perceptions, and therefore we must use our reason to discover truth. Existentialism denies the priority of objective truth and argues that we ought to start with the subjective or with existence. So to say that existence precedes essence is to say that there's no objective standard for right and wrong, there's no objective truth that has priority before we come into existence that shapes us, that determines who we ought to be. Rather, we're thrown into this existence that we call life, and then once we get there, we are the ones that create essence. We're the ones that create truth. And so we must start with the subject. We must start with our own perceptions of reality. That comes before, that's prior to what's truth. There's no truth outside of our perceptions. So existence precedes essence. Another thesis is that life is absurd. So one of the certain facts of reality is that all of us are going to die. Eventually we're going to die. This is a fact that we know will happen, but yet we flee the thought of this reality in 1,000 ways. Existentialists typically point to the absurd life or the cowardly life as being one where we entertain ourselves to death. So we know that we're going to die, but rather than face that reality, we will find ways to entertain ourselves. We'll go to a movie theater and pretend that the reality of death is not in front of us. We'll pretend that that's not going to happen, but that's the one thing that we know will for sure happen. And so because of this, the existentialist argues that life is actually meaningless, especially from an atheistic existentialist perspective. Everything that we do in this life is leading to a state of non-existence, of non-consciousness. When we die, we cease to exist. We're not aware of our surroundings, and we won't be there to remember anything that we've done in this life. And so whether we've done good things, whether we've done bad things, no matter what we do, the result is always the same, and that is we forget. We cease to exist, and therefore life is meaningless. Albert Camus argued that because of this, the greatest philosophical question is really, why not suicide? Why should we accept the absurdity of this existence? So we're thrown into this existence. We know that we're going to die. And so what's the difference if we die in 5 minutes or if we die in 50 years? Everything in between, the date that we're born and the date that we die, all of that's meaningless to begin with. And so why not commit suicide, why extend this meaningless life? And so this is one of the existentialist questions, because existentialist philosophy is not a philosophy about ideas. It's really a philosophy about life. What is the point or the meaning of life? The third thesis is that freedom is the core of our essence, or our existence, I should say. Jean-Paul Sartre said that we are condemned to freedom. And the reason for this is exactly because existence precedes essence. If you think about this in terms of traditional Christian theology, that actually argued that essence, or the essence of humanity, is that men and women were created in the image of God. And so if that's true, then the purpose of life is actually determined for us. So the purpose of life, or the perfect purpose of existence, is to live out your essence. And our essence is to be in the image of God. That's what our essence is. And so if that's true, if that's imparted to us on the outside, then the only purpose, everyone has the same purpose, and is to live out that essence. Well, atheist existentialists argued that you have no essence, which means that there is no ideal for humanity. We are completely free, therefore, to determine our nature and create our own essence. And so the authentic life, it's a phrase that you'll often hear from existentialist philosophers, the authentic life is to create yourself into whatever you want, because you can actually be anything. Your purpose isn't determined for you, because essence doesn't come before existence. You are thrown into this reality. You exist first, and then you have this freedom to create yourself into whatever you want. And this is, in short, the philosophy of existentialism. So again, make sure that you read through chapters 30 and 31. If you have any questions, you can certainly email me. But the quiz will cover the chapter, so read these chapters carefully, and that's the best way to prepare for the quiz.